Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are diving headfirst into the rapidly escalating Pacific military tensions. We're going to zoom out from one highly visible event, a recent missile launch, to uncover the sweeping strategic policies that are fundamentally shaping global security and what it all actually means for you.
So, why did China just fire a nuclear-capable ballistic missile into the South Pacific? Right? That's the big question. Back in July 2026, a Chinese submarine launched a JL-3 ballistic missile thousands of miles out into the ocean. It was a massive event that made headlines everywhere, and it demands that we ask, what exact message is Beijing sending with this China missile test? 2026 has already been a really tense year, but firing a China nuclear missile out into the open ocean, that takes things to a whole new level.
Here's how we're going to unpack this today. First, the Pacific missile test. Second, China's nuclear triad expansion. Third, the 2027 military goal. Fourth, the 2026 U.S. defense strategy. And finally, the Pacific security dilemma. Let's get started.
All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, the Pacific missile test.
As I mentioned, in July 2026, a Chinese submarine launched a JL-3 long-range ballistic missile right into the South Pacific. Now, Beijing officially called this a routine training arrangement, insisting it wasn't directed at any specific target or country. But, and you kind of have to read between the lines here, global defense analysts are pointing out that this highly visible China-Pacific missile test actually shows off some massive advancements in their sea-based deterrent capabilities.
To really grasp the scale of this, just look at the older JL-2 compared to this new JL-3 missile. It is a literal game changer. The JL-3 boasts a range of over 10,000 kilometers. That's a huge step up from the 7,200 kilometers of its predecessor. So what does that actually mean? Well, because of this extended range, this China submarine missile allows their vessels to target the contiguous United States mainland directly from their own protected coastal waters. They don't even have to risk navigating out into the open, vulnerable ocean anymore.
Which brings us to Section 2, China's nuclear triad expansion.
When you zoom out, the sheer speed of this military buildup is honestly staggering. Take a look at these numbers. Back in 2013, when Xi Jinping took over, China had roughly 250 nuclear warheads. Fast forward to 2022, they hit 410. And by early 2025, that stockpile had more than doubled from its starting point to an estimated 600 warheads. So when we talk about China nuclear weapons today, we're talking about an arsenal that is actively and rapidly expanding.
But hey, it's not just about hoarding raw numbers, right? It's a massive qualitative leap across the board. China's evolving nuclear triad now has the capability to launch from land, sea, and air. You've got the DF-41 ground-launched missiles, the JL-30 sea-launched ones equipped on their Type 094 and future Type 096 submarines, plus the Chi-S X-13 air-launched missiles for their bomber fleet. It is the whole shebang, a totally comprehensive modernization effort. Let's move on to Section 3, the 2027 military goal.
All of this new hardware points toward a very specific timeline, the 2027 Centennial Military Building Goal. Basically, this is Xi Jinping's explicit directive to build a fully modernized military by the 100th anniversary of the People's Liberation Army. And the Pentagon's 2025 report doesn't just see this as a ceremonial milestone, they frame it as a strict, capabilities-based requirement designed for potential warfighting, including a potential Taiwan-China war scenario, and crucially, for deterring any allied intervention in the region.
Now, if you've been tracking the China military 2026 news, you've probably seen the massive internal leadership purges and anti-corruption probes sweeping their defense industry. But here's the kicker. The Pentagon notes that, despite all this, the momentum hasn't stopped one bit. In fact, U.S. intelligence assesses that while these shakeups might cause some short-term organizational turbulence, they could ultimately yield a much more disciplined, coherent, and capable Chinese military in the long run.
All right, let's flip the perspective. Section 4, the 2026 U.S. defense strategy. So how is Washington responding? Enter the newly released 2026 National Defense Strategy from the Department of War. This document is essentially the official playbook for how the current U.S. administration intends to posture itself globally. And when you look at the U.S. China military dynamic, this strategy outlines a pretty dramatic shift in stated policy.
Right out of the gate, the strategy opens with a memo from the Secretary of War that explicitly calls out past administrations. It argues that previous leadership basically squandered military advantages on nation-building projects and interventionism. Instead, this memo pushes an America-first approach built on what they call flexible, practical realism. It boldly declares that the military's one core, irreplaceable role is fighting and winning wars that actually matter to the American people, rather than focusing on policing the rules-based international order.
To pull this off, the strategy pivots to four main priorities. First, defend the U.S. homeland. Second, project outward to deter China by erecting a really strong denial defense along the first island chain. The administration says this will be done through strength, not confrontation. Third, they are demanding increased burden sharing from international allies. And fourth, they want to supercharge the U.S. defense industrial base to sustain all of these massive efforts.
Let's talk about that burden sharing for a second, because the number they are throwing out is huge, 5%. To put that into perspective, the current NATO target is just 2%. The U.S. strategy is urging all allies to more than double their current commitments, asking for 5% of their gross domestic product on defense and security. That's broken down into 3.5% on core military spending and 1.5% on security-related spending. It's a crystal-clear signal that the U.S. expects its partners to dramatically step up their financial commitments as global tensions rise.
Let's bring it all together in Section 5, the Pacific Security Dilemma.
As defense technology experts are pointing out, geography is absolutely dictating the terms of this new era. The Pacific is no longer just a vast ocean acting as a buffer between great powers, it's actively transforming into a highly complex missile battlefield. It's a domain where raw distance, submarine survivability, and extreme long-range strike capabilities are what dictate power. The whole Indo-Pacific military balance is fundamentally shifting.
And that is exactly why we started this explainer with that missile launch. The JL-3 test wasn't just them showing off a piece of hardware. It was about proving they can project a highly survivable nuclear deterrence all the way across the Pacific Ocean. The big strategic reality we have to take away here is that as China expands its undersea fleet, the physical distance that once insulated the U.S. and its allies is effectively shrinking. And the whole China versus USA dynamic, the ocean is no longer a shield for sure, it is the very arena of competition.
So this leaves us with a pretty massive question to chew on as we look ahead. Both superpowers are drastically modernizing their arsenals, they're hardening their strategies, and launching these compounding shows of force. We really have to ask, will this posture of peace through strength actually maintain stability, or will it just accelerate a dangerous Pacific missile race, pushing the world one step closer to the devastating reality of future warfare? It's a complex, terrifying dilemma, and honestly, the stakes could not be higher. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.